So I'm going to talk to you today about Finn and Gylfie down at Elm Stump, which is just down the valley there, and their sort of courtship sort of stages, which have been absolutely fascinating to watch. So we're just going to take you through a few of those videos, because some of them are quite comical and some of them are just absolutely sheer beautiful, stunning shots. So we'll start off with some an absolute beauty, which is the preening. This is a super nest site, the Elm Stump, because it is so large. Barn owls will nest in larger sites, but this is Gylfie getting a preen by Finn, and he will be 2 years old this year, this male barn owl. So he was a 2019 surrogacy chick that we released here. So he's obviously stuck around. We managed to get that ring number, which is always really tricky to do off the cameras. We piece it together over a matter of days sometimes, just keep getting a little bit more data. But this is absolutely lovely to see, this sort of preening. And there's Gylfie returning the preening. And they can do this for hours. I mean, it's amazing to watch them on the live cameras. Sometimes they're both just sat there very still, but it's worth keeping tuned in to see these magical moments when they're actually preening. So you can see Finn's got that BTO ring on, and Gylfie is unrung. And a darker bird, she's darker round her front and on her feathers, which usually indicates she's a female. It's not always easy to tell which is a male and which is a female with the barn owls. But there's some basic sort of rules, is the females are usually darker than the males, but I've seen some males that are darker than some females, so it's just a guide really. But you can see, especially on the wing feathers there, that the male is much paler on the wing feathers especially. But this is super to watch these moments. They're really moments out of the world. Go all for them. Oh. Yeah, absolutely super. So we just love watching these sort of magical moments. You know, they have just started courting relatively recently, and sometimes he just gets it wrong. These are maybe his first attempts of mating, and even sometimes Gylfie has actually flown out of the nest box because she's not that impressed by some of his attempts at mating, but he over the weeks he was gradually getting the hang of it. Here we go, that's another another failed attempt there, and Gylfie is trying to be patient, but she's looking at the exit there. So I mean, it's super that we've got these cameras in there and they're able to watch these wonderful moments of their early courtship. So this is looking, to me, they keep going and having a little look in ash, but to me that the best place for these birds to nest is where they are in Elm Stump. Much safer site from the tawny owls, and more space, because as you've probably seen, they're not that clean in the nest. They will poo in the nest, whereas tawny owls go outside of the nest usually to do their necessary. So yeah, this is absolutely great sort of moments to see this early courtship stage. What we're going to hit them with next, Will?
Bit of the looking after their nest.
Faffing. Yeah, so this is Gylfie, and she is just having a little look round. A lot of people spotted there was a change of colour in the nest underneath where she is there now, and this, because they poo in there, there's pellets, it forms this hard crust, which is really difficult for the owls to make a nice little neat nest scrape. So I've actually went in there one night when it was the weather was pretty bad and the owls are out, so I don't want the owls to see me there ever, but sometimes I've got to help them out a little bit because they were struggling with this crust. So I've broken into the crust and then actually put some chippings off the chainsaw there to make a softer place for the eggs to rest, and then they can make their little nest scrape in there Barney, who had before, he would dig like a badger. He would dig all of that section out, and then I would have to sort of push it all back in, and then he would dig it out again. And Gylfie's like, where where do I nest in there? It's almost like a crater he used to dig out. But this is much more sort of subtle. They're just faffing a little bit, really, breaking up the pellets. They don't like sort of large lumps in the nest, so they actually break and shred up the pellets to make a comfortable little bed for the eggs coming through. Yes, that's a bit of faffing, nest faffing.
And now we have an interesting clip, so with some interesting behaviour.
That's what we want. Oh yes, Finn's brought food back here, and he hasn't quite got his chivalry, can't say it, but you know what I mean. He hasn't quite got it that he's supposed to hand the food over to Gylfie, and Gylfie's trying to teach him here, you're actually supposed to give that to me. But he's not one for sharing just yet. And that's not going to impress the female, is it? Grab the food and keep it and then fly off with it. So he needs to learn a little bit more generosity, but maybe he was a bit hungry. We have had some very cold temperatures and harsh weather, but obviously I hope things are set to warm up a little bit now. Now we're in March, but you never know. We could always get another spell of snow and cold weather yet this year. So yeah, so that's is that all the videos, Will?
That's all the videos.
Yes, that's all the videos. So we're going to take a few questions now, and I hope you enjoyed seeing those little clips. But keep an eye on the live cameras, because you see these magical moments yourself firsthand, and there's nothing quite like it as the barn owls in the nest. It's super.
So we'll take some questions. So we've had one from Janice. She asks, when does their breeding season start? And why did Bomber and his mate have their eggs in the middle of winter?
Oh, because they were, well, I'll start with the first bit. So barn owls, if they're in good condition, they can breed almost any month of the year. So we've had chicks fledging as late as November, and we've had them on eggs. I think the earliest is in February, so there's just a little gap over the colder months of the year. But if barn owls feel as if they're well fed and in good condition, they can double brood quite often if they have the food there, and that's the tricky bit nowadays. Vole numbers, naturally peak and trough, but to get those really high vole years is, it's getting rarer, I think. I mean, it's was said every 4 years that we get a good vole year, and then barn owls can double brood, but it's been slightly less than that recently. So it's just food. Food is key, and the same with the tawny owls. If they are feeling in good condition, they will nest earlier. But in general, tawny owls do not second brood if they raise chicks. There's some very, very few instances where a tawny owl will lay again if their nest is spoilt by predators or squirrels, that they will then lay again. But these instances are very rare, so we're literally crossing everything. We've seen the tawny owls looking in nest boxes in ash stump as a pair, so there may be a chance that they'll lay again, and that's what we're sort of literally crossing everything for, that they'll lay again. But tawny owls are very, they're different in a way that they do nest earlier, so they're quite often on eggs in February, definitely by mid-March quite often. And then they look after their chicks literally really, really well right the way through until late summer, and that they work on the basis of having less chicks, but actually really, really caring for them a lot more. Whereas barn owls will produce more chicks, and maybe the aftercare isn't quite as good once they, once they sort of, after a couple of weeks of them leaving the nest. They sort of slacken off on the feeding, whereas tawny owls will keep feeding them for quite a few months after they leave the nest. And tawny owls leave a lot earlier as well. They leave the nest much earlier than barn owls, when they can barely fly quite often.
This next question comes from Alex Small on Instagram. Do barn owls mate together for life, or have other mates as well?
Yeah, they usually will mate for life, but life is quite hard for barn owls. Out there in the countryside, we've got a lot of threats from roads, collisions, and then they can get predated by other bigger birds of prey as well, especially coming into this time of year when we hit into March, buzzards can knock them down as a sort of territorial thing. So yeah, they're not a long-lived owl. Tawny owls will live longer in the wild than barn owls.
How many chicks do barn owls usually lay? And that comes from Red Owl.
Yeah, so they can have any, not any number, but a vast number of eggs and chicks, and it's all due to how much food that they have quite often, but also due to, about the owl as well. The most I've seen in a nest in this area is 7, which is a really big clutch. I've sometimes seen 6s, sometimes seen 5s, but most often where we are, because we're at altitude here, we often see 3s, 4s, is quite, if I see 4 barn owls in a nest, I'm very happy up here, but occasionally we've seen these bumper years where we get more.
We have a question from Steve Windermere asking about the tawny nest, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Will you remove the egg from the failed nest to encourage a new occupant? And will you candle the egg to see if it had been viable?
Yeah, that's the tricky one, because if I go to that nest box, they could be watching me, you see, and I keep thinking I should go and remove that egg, and it will maybe spur them on to lay back in that actual nest, which is their preferred site. But if those owls see me removing that egg, then it could put them off that nest site a little bit as well. So it's kind of a balancing act. So if I could blindfold that owl for a few minutes and nip up there, I would do it straight away. But there is, disturbance issues if I go to that nest now. The owl's in there now, so I can't do it during the day, and if I do it during the night, the owls will be watching me. So need a little mini drone to go in and take it out. So it is unusual that they don't clear the nest out themselves ever. And to say candling it, I'll be picking that egg up very carefully and just giving it a little shake. I suspect that egg is maybe infertile, because just the way she was with it after the other egg hatched, she was just on and off. Before the eggs hatched, there's little knocking and tapping noises. If anyone's hatched hen eggs or quail eggs or other eggs, there's activity in that egg before they hatch, and the birds that are caring for them will actually know. Usually we're looking at, about 1.5, 2 days for a tawny owl to hatch out of an egg from the first signs. But it's just getting a little bit too drawn out, and that little chick just needed just to have a little bit more strength. It obviously ran out of energy, and we have had, some really tricky weather here. So, it's been, difficult, down to minus nearly 14 here. So, it's been chilly for them.
Sue R says, I've noticed Finn scrapes a lot. Is it usual for male barn owls to do this, or just females?
Yes, very usual for males. They're preparing the nest site for the female, and as I said, Barney would just dig like a badger. He would just clear that whole area, and he dug too much. So they just need a nest scrape about this big, and he would take half the box and scrape it all back. It's completely usual.
Sue R is also asking, will there be sound in the new Tawny Aston Ashwood? Camera there is fantastic.
Yeah, there will be sound in there. There is sound in there. We've just got to implement it all. We're still in the midst of a changeover with the computers, and we're waiting for the systems to get settled down and be confident that we can run them. So there's still work to do there. Will the tawny owls nest there? That is the question. We're into March now. That was the first time they went into that nest box. I kind of suspect that was the male, but it could have been the female. The calls are so similar that they can actually produce. There isn't one tawny owl does one call and another tawny owl does another call. And then there isn't actually a difference, because obviously we've distinguished our owls down here apart by their colouring. There's no rules with tawny owls. We only know which is male and female once they lay eggs, and obviously their behaviour. Nothing to do with their looks. We just know our owls because we know them well, which is which, the male and the female.
Jenny C asks, is Finn's behaviour typical of a young male's first experience of mating? For example, his stamping and screeching even when Gylfie is there by him.
Yeah. I mean, it's always absolutely fascinating and comical watching barn owls in this early courtship, and it's these little awkward moments at the beginning. It's just hilarious, and it's the same every single time. Because he's like in the box there calling, and then Gylfie came in for the first time, and it's like, oh my god, I didn't expect anyone to come. And so he obviously then had no idea what to do after he'd managed to call a female in. So it's absolutely typical. What you're seeing here is it's comical to us watching. Fabulous stuff.
Next question is when do we expect barn owl eggs this year?
Where are we now?
We're just at the beginning
of March.
Really, aren't we?
Are we going to make predictions? It's 20th-ish, 21st, 23rd. Should we go for 23rd?
Could do, yeah.
Or a bit earlier.
Last year it was the 31st of March.
31st.
Yeah, so we'll see how we
31st. Yeah, so hopefully this month, yeah. There's a lot of faffing still to do there, a lot more courtship, but it's all looking really good for elm stump. I don't want them to nest in ash stump because it is just too open for the tawny owls. The kestrels had some trouble when they nested there last year. I'm hoping those go into sycamore out the back here because that's a safer site for them. And this morning, if anyone watched the live cameras, there was some superb footage of the kestrels in sycamore and ash stump, and at one point the male was in sycamore and the female was down ash stump at the same time, which was just really sort of funny to watch. But they'll make their mind up, hopefully, fingers crossed, everything crossed, they nest in one of these sites that we've got here. It'd be nice to have another barn owl nesting on site with ghosts, but I think it just caused problems out there. Too many barn owls. Yeah.
So that's all the questions we've got time for today, so thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, all right, so join us next week. We're just down to 1 day a week now on the Thursdays. There's just so much to do out there with fitting these cameras, and we've got to get everything up to speed before the breeding season. So join us next Thursday and we'll bring you some new stuff. See you later.